Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it, like many companies, hasn't been 100% linear journey, even though we would have liked. So we started out building actually something very different. It was a Facebook advertising tool. Got some local investors involved in Sweden, Industrifonden and Subito, and actually built a reasonably sized SME tool for that, but decided it wasn't going to be a $1 billion company and decided to do a pivot. That's 2014. We started building Funnel, and since then, the vision of Funnel has really played out the way we view it. But it's been a pretty long journey. It took us probably 2 years to go to product market fit. Then in 2017, we raised our Series A from Boulderton. 2018, you guys came on board, even though you'd been the chairman for some time before that. And then 2019 was really our big growth year. I think we went from a startup to a scale up. We went from 70 people to 140 people, more than doubled revenue, and raised a really large round of $47 million at the end of last year.
Very good.
And I should say where we brought in 2 more partners, which was basically F Prime in Boston and 8 Roads in London.
Now, you mentioned that early on you actually did a pivot from Quaya, which was the Facebook advertising tool, into Funnel. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what was your thinking in doing that pivot, and how was that related to actually building a global market leading company?
Yeah, we had a clear idea of what we wanted to do, and we decided to sort of follow the path of Facebook that we really believed in very early, and that turned out to be a really good choice, because Facebook really did deliver on what we thought. And we had kind of had the idea that we were going to build a social advertising tool, add on more platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn. But when we really sort of talked to our customers, and we built some scale. We did about $100 million of revenue for Facebook through our platform, and we're they're really their only big partner in the SME segment. But we were too close to them to really be able to build like this $1 billion company. Our original vision of sort of adding a few more social channels didn't resonate with customers. So we took a step back and said, how can we solve a problem that's a bit more unique, that nobody's solving, and that's a big problem for marketers, and that really we can own, and that can over time become a big company. And that's kind of when we went back and talked to customers and really tried to figure out what problems do you have that you haven't solved. And what kept coming back was the fact that they have so many companies that can help them make ads and optimize ads, but when it comes to figuring out how you're doing across your P&L of your marketing, everybody was using a spreadsheet. And we said, well, that's interesting. And we couldn't find any solution to that. Let's tackle that problem. And we did, and it's kind of played out that way.
Okay, thanks. So, I mean, in a sense, Funnel has been a global company from day one, and you have the vast majority of your customer acquisition comes through online channels. And in what ways does that benefit you, and vice versa? Does it pose any particular challenges when you're scaling to become a global company?
I think my takeaway is, and we certainly did this, when you start to, we're sort of starting to reach product market fit, and you really think about your go-to-market, you got to figure out something that works, right? And we did that. We didn't know what was going to work. We tried inbound, we tried outbound, and in our segment of with e-commerce marketing directors, pretty hard to reach them in sort of big markets with outbound and inbound sort of worked. So we ended up building an inbound model, and then we sort of that fit us well, and that's what we built. I think one of sort of unexpected benefits of it is that your market then becomes a lot larger. If you're outbound, you start with your local market, and then you pick another geography, and you sort of gradually go there. For us, our initial market was Europe. It's actually quite hard when you do inbound, especially if you with paid advertising. You can't really target too much unless you're in some enormous vertical. So we from day one, we're across Europe, and then we started to get interest from the US. it was hard to sort of time zone wise get the sales teams to handle those inbound leads. And then we decided to set up an office. It was the end of 2016 in the US. And the benefit that came out of that we hadn't thought so much about before was, my co-founder moved over to Boston to set up the office up. And when he arrived in Boston, he essentially called and said, okay, I'm here. And the marketing team basically, just mirrored the advertising for the US, and the leads just started to flow in. And since then, that office has just taken off, and US is now 40% of our revenue. So that was a great benefit of it. And then, like everything, you find a channel, you should double down on it. You should double down on it again and again. But then at some point, you got to take a step back and say, okay, well, I probably need more than one channel. And especially as you kind of reach $10 million, $20 million in annualized revenue, if you're really gonna propel through that and go all the way to 100 million and beyond, you need more legs to stand on, and then you need to diversify. And that's sort of where we are now. That's something we think a lot about.
Right. Another thing which you guys have been through, and which is, a focus of yours, is the fact that the size of your average customer organization has grown quite significantly over time. What are the main changes you have had to make to product, go-to-market, customer success, whatever, to accommodate larger customers, extending all the way now to global enterprises?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So, our original product, our Facebook advertising tool, was squarely done for the SME market, product-led growth, and sort of no-touch product. And we thought that was what this product was going to be as well. But it turned out to really solve this problem well, it was a little more complex. And SMEs really kind of look for, ease of use. That's like the key for an SME, otherwise they can't really use the product. So we kind of went then and positioned it a bit more for the mid-market. The mid-market customers tend to really want to have their problem solved. They can deal with more complexity, but they want their problem solved, and they want it solved out of the box. They don't want a system integration project. And that fit us well, and that's really the product that we originally built. So it's still easy to use, but it's more complex than SME product, but it solves the problem out of the box. And then, as the products become more capable, we've started to see enterprise leads come in, and we've started to deploy more and more enterprises. And enterprises, well, their security features become more important, and there's a whole sort of set of scalability things. And so it's essentially an enterprise edition, an enterprise feature set that you need to fill. And if you do that, then you can sell into them, and you need, like a security department, you need certain sort of things that they feel like you're reputable. And then the next step after that is the super enterprise, and there it becomes more like, okay, you need a solution, and not sort of just that your product does what it does, but actually they might not want a technology to deliver that they can build dashboards in. They might actually want a service where somebody builds dashboards for them. So it's more a solution. You might actually need partners, you might system integrators to go there. And I would say we're sort of sometimes there, but not that isn't the sweet spot of where we are. We're more in the enterprise and sort of mid-market segment.
Interesting. So I know you've spent a lot of time and energy on positioning work, and also working with analysts to really define a new category of software that you're building. Can you tell us a bit about this work and why it's so important when you're trying to establish a global market leading company?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the most important things that you can do as a founder is to craft your company story and to tell it. And I think it's important both internally and externally. Internally, it's basically to rally your team around your vision and direct how you're going to build the organization, how you're going to build your product. And externally, it's to sort of get momentum behind your thinking and you got to have if you do a startup, it's really helpful to have a strong point of view, and sort of get traction behind your point of view, your new way to tackle a problem and approach a market. And you want to get the traction behind that. Now, if you're going in more into some SME and mid-market, then you do that primarily with your own website, with your own content, and by getting a lot of companies to use your product and getting used to it. And then if you go more into the enterprise, then it's very helpful to work with analysts. They both help you understand what the enterprise is looking for, and you help them sort of understand your product and how you fit into their view of the market. And then there are challenges to it, like, basically analysts love categories, and they have a lot of categories. And if you have a new point of view, you don't fit into one of those categories. So initially, then they will try to put you in a category and you don't quite fit there, and that doesn't work very well. And then you actually have a strategic choice. You can actually decide, well, here are the categories. So a really easy, straightforward thing is to, well, let's pick one that's the closest to what we are and flesh out our product according to the requirements. Like they will give you, a Gartner and a Forrester will give you the requirements for the category. And then you fit in and you're part of the research, you'll be part of RFPs, and you will be one out of 10 vendors, and sometimes you'll be selected and sometimes not. So a fair amount of competition, lead rich, a lot of competition, or you can have this strong point of view, try to convince the analyst that there's something new here, and over time you build your own category, which is very hard, very expensive, but the price is 100 times larger.
That's really interesting. I mean, another, I guess, facet of this is that you're also working closely with some of the largest ecosystems and software providers in the world, including the likes of Google, Amazon, Snowflake, etc. How is that important in the overall context of building this true product vision, and how does that help you?
Well, I think these really large companies, as they grow up, they create entire new markets for startups, and it's a really interesting place to be. I think you have to be very careful. If they are like big elephants, and when they roll over in sleep, a lot of startups die. and our Facebook advertising tool that we built originally was a little bit like that. It still actually exists and works well, but it's a little bit at the danger of that because it was a bit too close. Funnel is a little bit further away. We deal with 500 different marketing platforms. For example, a Facebook or Google is one, and they're really important, but they're one out of many. And we're sort of a little more in a category where we compete with other companies of our size. But they do create huge markets, and then I think partners are a really good potential. And partners can be large and they can be small, and you got to experiment. And usually when you start a company, it's a little bit hard. And then after time, you find the right way, just like with your go-to-market model. And then typically it's one type of partner or one specific partner works well, and then just double down, triple down on that.
Have you found, we often meet companies who say they will run an indirect sales model and sell through partners. Have you found that these partners are actually selling for you, or are they just helpful in the sense that you're part of that big ecosystem where there's a lot of market pull?
No, we're more part of the ecosystem where there's market pull. It's also a trade-off, just like with analysts. So the big partners, the big tech companies, want partners, but they want partners who fit in with their point of view of how everything works. And you got to make the choice. Either you do that, and then actually it becomes a pretty lead-rich environment because they will help you. But then you're actually confined to doing exactly sort of what fits there. Or if you have a point of view that's different, then you don't fit quite as well in, and you might get some leads but fewer. And that's a sort of a trade-off you need to make, I have found.
Interesting. So I think we have time probably for one more question. We only have a couple of minutes remaining, and I was going to change tack a little bit, but still on the topic of scaling to a global leading company. I mean, I've certainly never seen any company as focused on building culture. So you're a very culture-focused organization. What are the main challenges when you scale culture beyond the home office, across time zones, work cultures, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends. I think a lot of people say culture is important. I think what's also important is to figure out actually what's a good culture, and you should spend a lot of time first on both those things. And then if you have, again, it's like with your product, if you have a point of view with how you want your culture to be, I think the biggest challenge is to hire senior people. If you hire junior people, it's very important to be very clear with everybody you hire that, okay, well, this is our culture, this is how we work. this is how we don't work, and this is the benefits. What does this sound like? And if people go, oh, this is fantastic, it's great. Okay, well, if you're a junior person, you haven't worked that long, you're probably pretty amenable to sort of working this way and seeing the benefit of it and being part of it. If you're senior, you have like 10, 15, 20 years of experience, worked in many other companies, pretty used to how things work. It's much harder. And when you do a scale up, you need to hire senior people. It's really hard to just promote from within and hire junior people, because they both have to grow into the role and grow with the company. So it's like, and some will, but it's quite hard, and you can always find that. And I think that's the biggest challenge. So that has nothing to do with remote. With remote specifically, I think you have to write things down more. You have to reinforce things, talk more about it. And then the other thing is, as the company gets bigger, culture and maintaining culture becomes a bigger part of my job. So I increasingly spend more and more time with it every year, I find.
Okay, just a very quick final question on that. So in this age of remote and everything, how do you run the culture sessions? Do you do online all hands, etc., or how do you do that?
Yeah, we do online all hands. The other thing that's really important is onboarding. So we have onboarding week every month, and as part of that, I run a culture session every month with all the new employees, and then basically we spend about an hour talking through the company culture. And we will also do other things like run book circles and talk about books that pertain well and work well with our culture and so on.
Very good. Thanks very much, Fredrik. Our time is up. I hope everyone who listened in enjoyed it. And as I said, follow up through the conference channels or other means if you have questions. Thanks, Fredrik.
Great. Thanks, Mikael.